All right, so over the last couple of days, primarily this morning for me at least, it seems it's been like a reignition of this argument whether or not Sam Wilson as a character and Anthony Mackie as an actor should be able to portray and become Captain America. And it's it got me thinking. It's actually kind of funny because I tend to watch like anime fight videos and movie fights and stuff like that at the gym, especially when I'm doing my cardio. And I very often watch or fairly often watch the fight between Bucky, who I'm going to talk about in this video, and Steve Rogers, Captain America. And I can definitely see why some fans will have been upset primarily at that scene because it does hint at Bucky being the next Captain America. So for that to not happen, I do see why many people would be upset. However, I'm also kind of just over people finding reasons for either Anthony Mackie as an actor or for Sam Wilson as a character to not be Captain America because I think you can make a good argument for why primarily Sam Wilson as a character is a good fit to be Cap. But let me take this one step at a time. So, again, I don't know about you guys, but as of this moment, this morning, for me, Carl Lumley, I would believe is his name. He portrays Isaiah Bradley in the MCU, who, in relation to Steve Rogers, Isaiah Bradley was, I want to say, kind of the first Captain America, but he wasn't all the way there. He wouldn't have been able to achieve the same feats that Steve would have been able to achieve and has achieved both in the MCU as well as in the comics. But we're primarily going to focus on the MCU. It creates this parallel of Steve, Captain America, and Bucky with Sam Wilson, Captain America, and Isaiah Bradley, kind of Captain America, if you will, right? And so Carl Lumley apparently made a statement saying that he's kind of over people bringing up Anthony Mackie being Captain America and people not accepting him for that role. I'm kind of there as well. Now, we could go about this as far as Anthony Mackie as an actor. We could talk about Sam Wilson in the MCU and him being the right choice to fill that role, or maybe the wrong choice and why Bucky would have been better fit. I think I'm going to talk about why Sam Wilson is a good Captain America. I haven't made a video talking about his movie, the Captain America movie, where Sam Wilson is Cap. And I meant to do that. I just haven't. I'm probably still going to do it because it was fun. A lot of people didn't like it. It was very fun for me. It was not a bad movie at all. But there are definitely some very obvious differences between Sam Wilson as Cap and Steve Rogers as Cap, which I think is actually going to be the main thing I'm going to talk about for him before I get to the Bucky part of the video. For Sam Wilson being Captain America, the main complaint that people have when it comes to why him being Cap is just a bad choice, aside from the race/gender agenda that Disney Marvel seems to have, which I get the frustration, but anything relating to comics, I think that race swapping stuff needs to go out the window. That people need to stop bringing that up. When it comes to Sam Wilson as a character being a good fit for Cap, I think he is a good fit, and the movie depicts that very well. However, I do think the way that he would be an effective Cap is very limited compared to Steve. The main argument to be made is that Sam Wilson is not going to be able to do the same things in combat, physically and everything, that Steve Rogers is able to do, and that's very evident. Now, obviously, if he's dealing with maybe ground level villains and like hired guns like he did in his movie, then he can get a little creative with it. I think the directors, I don't know if it was the Russo brothers that directed it. I don't believe so. But the directors of the Captain America Brave New World movie, I think they intentionally drew that parallel between the way that Sam Wilson fights and the way that Steve Rogers fights. Because the way that Steve Rogers fights, he is a pacifist. He would rather not squabble, but should it go there, he can handle himself very well. Versus Sam, I think he's not as anti-combat as Steve, but he still prefers to connect with the person, which is one of his strengths I'm going to mention. But in the event that he is squabbling with somebody, he may not be as straight arrow, like, punchy kick as Steve Rogers. Whenever he got into combat, it was combat, and it was very straightforward. Not to say he lacked strategy, but he was going to punch, he was going to kick, he was going to throw his shield, he was going to block, and nobody stopped until the fight was won, or for one reason or another, they were involuntarily separated. Versus Sam, and this is one spoiler I will give to his movie because it's been out more than long enough. When he's fighting, I forget the guy. I'll put his picture up. I can't remember. When he's fighting him, he's more roundabout in the way he fights. He will, go hand in hand, but if it seems like he's losing in that, or if he's not making as much progress, then he will get creative. And one way that he showed that in the movie was him using a car battery, essentially turning it into a bomb, which catches the guy off guard, throws him, or he kicks him into a windshield, essentially winning that fight. Still a very great, interesting fight. It was not boring, and I think it showcases another angle as to why he will be an effective combatant as Captain America when it comes to him not having the shield or his armor, which apparently Wakanda made, because that also was brought up. Again, the main complaint, or one of the main complaints, is he has no, super abilities of any kind. He's not super strong like Steve. He's nowhere near as fast. He really needs the suit and the shield to be effective. But I think the way that movie was directed was meant to tackle that specifically. He doesn't need it to be like to your average human to be a threat. But since they are dealing with like extraterrestrial beings and even interdimensional beings, they already got the Celestials in play. They got the Eternals and all these folks that may or may not work their way back in the MCU. Who knows? Because people didn't like the Eternals and all that stuff. Might talk about that. But when it comes to those guys, he's not going to be as much of a problem, and his creativity is going to be pretty limited when it comes to, unless he knows how to use the resources that are at the palm of his hands. But just because he's not a super soldier by serum or by birth does not mean that he would have been an ineffective Captain America. And I think when it comes to his conflict with Red Hulk, Thunderbolt Ross, one, I think he actually handled that fight very well. Like, if he was fighting against almost anybody else, I think Sam actually would have won that fight. But since it's a Hulk, and the closest thing to the actual Hulk that we've seen in the MCU, Bruce Banner, we haven't even seen the actual, well, in a solo movie, we haven't seen the actual Hulk in some time. This is the closest thing we've seen to an actual Hulk from the Red Hulk. And even that was a little different because he's not supposed to lose his mind. He's supposed to retain his sanity and intelligence. So we'll see if they change that later. The way that fight came to an end with Sam appealing to Thunderbolt Ross's humanity, in my opinion, still makes him a good Captain America, because he knows he's not going to be able to match the physical feats of Steve. That's asinine. He will be dumb to even think that he's capable of doing that, which is why him having like an internal dilemma of whether or not he's good enough to be Cap is a central part of the movie, as well as why he kind of gave up the shield in Falcon and Winter Soldier in the first place, and Bucky was on his behind about it. Even though Bucky probably also thought that he wouldn't have been able to measure up in terms of combat and stuff like that. The fact is, Steve trusted you with it. He saw that you would be a good fit to take over the Captain America mantle. I think he's proven, at least, and again, we're focused on the MCU here. I think he's proven that he is an effective Captain America. In terms of Anthony Mackie's ability to portray him, I think he does it very well. He did it very well in the movie. And the only thing I would say that was a little annoying was at the end of Captain and Winter Soldier, because that actually ended up being a good show. I remember when it came out and people weren't that receptive to it as far as the actual show's quality. I wasn't either, but I rewatched it some months ago and I was like, yeah, this is actually good. But the only thing that really annoyed me was the very end of essentially the series, when he does take up the armor and the Captain America shield, and he's talking to a bunch of, politicians on the ground level. I think after the whole situation is said and done with the little girl who's basically a terrorist, and he just goes on this long speech, and it's like, okay, you are over delivering at this point. But that it doesn't even necessarily have anything to do with Anthony Mackie's ability to portray Cap. That is just writing. That was just a lot. Anthony Mackie's ability to portray Captain America, as well as why Sam Wilson as a character is a good fit to be Captain America, I think the MCU has actually done that well, primarily in the Brave New World movie. When it comes to Bucky, supposedly he was supposed to be the next Captain America. He was in the comics. He was the second Cap before Sam, so timing-wise, it is thrown off. I get that. And then supposedly, allegedly, Sebastian Stan said that before he joined the MCU, he was promised to be Cap. Now, I don't know if they spoke about timelines and what movie would that happen. Was it going to be a variant? Was he going to be the Captain America? I'm assuming he meant the Captain America of Earth 616. But, obviously that hasn't happened. And when it comes to the whole thing of he would be a better Cap, and personally would I prefer him to be Cap, I don't necessarily have a preference either way. I'm good with Sam, but I would have liked to see Bucky as Captain America. And I think the main question I want to tackle here is, would Bucky have been a better Cap from a narrative standpoint? I hate to say it, but the way things are now, yeah, I think Bucky would have been narrative wise a better Captain America than Sam. Now, of course, they wanted to, kind of put a dichotomy on the situation. You have a guy who had all the characteristics of Captain America, because Captain America is not just a role, it's not even just a mantle, it's an ideology, to the point where in the comics, there are many Captain Americas of many different racial / ethnic backgrounds. And it's not really a problem with Steve, at least in the comics. But when it comes to Bucky, or rather, when it comes to Sam Wilson as a character in the MCU, they do create this dichotomy of Steve being the guy, his character was straight, but his physique wasn't there. We give him the super soldier serum. Now he has the physique as well as enhanced intelligence, knows almost all martial arts across the planet, and is an expert at all of them on some Batman stuff. And so he has the character and the heart that it needed, but now he can physically execute. Sam, in terms of regular humans, can still whoop behind. You know what I'm saying? He still can kick people's butt like it's nobody's business. But from a super person standpoint, no. He doesn't have enhanced intelligence in terms of like a serum or something like that. He's smarter than the average person. Everything to the average everyday citizen, Sam will beat that person up and beat him down and outsmart him more times than not. I am willing to put money on it. But we have to look at the bigger picture in terms of enemies they'll be dealing with. He doesn't have enhanced strength. He's nowhere near as fast as Steve, which most likely means he's not nearly as smart as Steve, and let alone some of the other smarter people in Marvel. Definitely not touching Reed Richards, Peter Parker, none of them, Doctor Doom, Tony Stark, definitely not touching them. And then even when it comes to the tech that he has, he's not even technically savvy like that. He got his armor from Wakanda, and the shield was made by Tony's dad, Howard Stark. So everything he has, aside from his character and the way he's able to connect with people during his time of being, I guess, like a veteran therapist or something like that to help veterans that have PTSD, he's able to connect with people's hearts, which is probably one of the things that he has a strong overlap with Steve, which he also would use to connect with people, villains, adversaries, and even people on his team, when he wanted to. But other than that, he can't really do much of the things that Steve was able to do. Even if you want to believe the Tony and Steve argument, everything special about you came out of a bottle. Not necessarily, because he was able to wield Mjolnir, and no matter how physically strong Steve was, he never would have been able to do that and pull that off if he was not of good heart and character. So Steve Rogers was inherently special. He just needed the body to match. You could possibly make the same argument for Sam. I don't know if he's ever wielded Mjolnir. I don't think so, though. From a narrative standpoint, yeah, you create this thing where you have a guy that has the core of the right stuff, and we need to fix the outer appearance. Now you have a guy that has the outer appearance, but he's questioning if he has the internal strength to handle it. And that dichotomy is very creative. It's kind of a go-to thing for anything fiction, really in general. And, to do that back to back instead of, doing Steve and then doing Bucky, who's just a slightly lesser Steve, and then maybe doing Sam at some point. Maybe Marvel thought that wouldn't have been effective. But I think story-wise, Bucky still would have been better than Sam, because Bucky has a background that kind of is the epitome of what it means to be Captain America, the way it will all come full circle. In addition to one of the things I noticed after the fact, I actually didn't notice it until maybe like last year or something, when I was watching that Winter Soldier versus Steve Rogers fight, when Steve was out of uniform. The whole thing of Bucky taking his shield before throwing it back at Steve to try to like cut his head off, that easily could have been taken to people as comic book readers who know, oh, they're saying Bucky's going to be Cap. Like Cap, because obviously comic book readers are way ahead of this. So they're like, okay, we got the foreshadowing. We see this. Now we just need to know how it's going to get there. And just for it to never happen, I can definitely see why people wouldn't like that. When it comes to his story, it definitely is a better fit. I enjoy Anthony Mackie as Cap. I love Sam Wilson as a character so far in the MCU, but Bucky definitely would have been a better narrative. If he had become Cap, it would have been more fitting because of his time as a Winter Soldier. The fact that he's still dealing with the PTSD and I guess you can say the nightmares of what he's done, or at least the memories of what he's done, still dealing with the feeling of knowing that I did all this stuff, but I didn't have a choice. It was one of those things where someone took my body for a joyride, but I knew what my hands were doing the whole time. And that would mess anyone's head up. And one of the things about being Captain America is supposed to be the ideology that no one is beyond redemption. Again, even in Brave New World, I truly believe Sam did that very well when it came to appealing to Thunderbolt Ross and even connecting with him at the end of the movie instead of saying, okay, cool, I finally talked him down, got him off the street, lock him up, and I never want to see him again. No, like he still wanted to maintain a connection with Thunderbolt Ross to the point where it made me wonder, is he going to come back at some point, or is it supposed to be a one and done? Because Harrison Ford is up there in age. You know, are we going to see him again? I actually would be interested in that. Buck, from presumably being dead to coming back to life, not having control of his body. You know, he had to go through years of like unbrainwashing, and it's definitely, and then dealing with the PTSD and nightmares that come with it, and also taking on a politician's position in an attempt to kind of make up for that, definitely screams Captain America through and through. So for the Thunderbolts movie to come out and for his team to now be dubbed the New Avengers, but him to not be the actual Captain America of that team, yeah, I can see why that doesn't sit right with some folks, especially if this supposed rumor that when Doomsday comes, it's essentially going to be a Civil War 2 of the New Avengers versus Sam Wilson's Avengers. I'm not necessarily against it, but I wouldn't be as into it as the original Civil War. Yeah, they kind of have the whole rivalry thing between Sam and Bucky down, but I think they finally reached a point where they don't need that conflict. Steve and Tony, like even 1v1 ideologically, needed the Civil War conflict. I truly believe that. But I feel like Sam and Bucky are past that. And if they were to try to make part of that skirmish, if it were to happen, if they were to try to make part of that skirmish, just give me the shield, I deserve it, I'm more fit for it, it was hinted at, and I had the skills of Steve before he passed away or before whatever happened to him, you're not fitting for it, I need to take it. I feel like that would make the progress of their relationship between Winter Soldier and the Falcon going into Captain America Brave New World, I feel like it would throw all of that away, and I wouldn't be a big fan of that. But again, when it comes to the like physical capabilities that people align with Captain America, as well as intelligence, the experience actually being, well, no, Sam's a veteran too. He was in the Air Force. So they're all veterans. But you know, when it comes to the skill and everything, Bucky truly is the closest thing to a second Steve Rogers / Captain America in general that we have right now. So for him to have been bypassed when they could have made an interesting story out of him, I definitely agree that was a fumble. As much as I do enjoy Sam Wilson / Anthony Mackie's portrayal of him, that was a fumble. But I'm not going to sit here and say that Anthony Mackie or Sam Wilson is like a bad choice altogether. No, he has demonstrated why Sam Wilson as a character is great as a Captain America in his own right. The main question is the way he operates and the way that he becomes, or rather embodies Captain America. How long is that going to last? Because again, Captain America is basically an ideology as well as an actual mantle / person. So even when it came to, I forget what story it was. It wasn't the Blade story. I'm flashing back to a Blade comic story where the vampires took over the planet. They blocked out the sun and everything, and they were trying to figure out who was in charge of it, just to find out that Blade was in charge of all the vampires, and he was the reason it was happening. Just to find out it wasn't really Blade. He was possessed by the first vampire. But I don't think it was that story. Yeah, I can't remember. It's another story where like the Avengers try to fight somebody and they all get washed, and Doctor Strange or somebody makes it a point to save Sam because he's Captain America, and at the end of the day, they need a symbol. So They didn't save him because you're the most powerful or you have the weapon or skill that we need to take this guy down. No, like if Captain America is gone, everyone's mentally checked out already. We got other heavy hitters, but if people don't see Captain America, too many serious questions and serious emotions are going to arise. So we need to pull you out. And I think not anyone can do that, but both Sam and Bucky could do that. But the fact that Bucky, even if he has stayed in that type of situation, could still combat someone and have a better chance of coming out, yeah, I would say that makes him, I would have liked to see that play out. I'm not going to say which one would have been a better Captain America. They would have been very different. I'm a firm believer that Bucky would have went about being Captain America in the MCU in a very similar fashion that Steve Rogers would have. He probably would have been quicker to the punch, but he would have went about it in a very similar fashion. Sam Wilson has his own method that is noticeably different and in my opinion works very well, but for the long haul may be a bit ineffective. But I can see pros and cons on both sides. But if I were to tell Marvel to do it all over again, sad to say, I think I actually would like to see a Bucky Captain America more than a Sam Wilson Captain America. But I'll go ahead and leave this rant off here, guys. What do you guys think of the whole thing? Do you have any thoughts, whether it's the agenda on race swapping, gender swapping? Do you think Bucky should have been Captain America, or do you think it fits Sam Wilson's story more, especially the structure of you got Steve Rogers and the way he operated, and now you have how Sam operates, and there's a clear difference there. It's definitely some overlap, in their characteristics and traits, which is why Steve did it, but also some key differences in how they operate. And do y'all think that Sam Wilson long term is still a suitable candidate to be Captain America, or maybe for a short term, but in the long term, it would be better if he passed it over to Bucky? But yeah, I'll go and leave this video off here, guys. Let me know your thoughts and comments and feedback in the comment section below. I'll see you on the next one. Later.